Hey y'all. So this is an impromptu live right now. I just got off of work, just got back home, um, kind of washed off my face, and man, there's some fucked up shit going on in this country right now. And for those of you that may tune in, like I said, this is an impromptu. I just wanted to go live and talk about it. I'm going to send out a couple invites and maybe see if there's a couple people that want to um, join me on this stream. Um, so give me just 1 second. I apologize for taking a second here. Model Misfit is here. That fist of defiance. Yes, the fist of defiance. I'm going to send out a couple of invites. So, like I said, I apologize. Give me 1 second. I just want to make sure that I get all my ducks in a row. But I wanted to invite some people that don't live in this country. That maybe have a different idea about what's going on in this country. What do other people around the world think about what is happening right now in America and what has been happening in America? And what do they think about, what do we look like to the rest of the world right now? Because I have a feeling that we actually look like a bunch of fools to the rest of this world. And so I want to get their opinions. So if you hang with me for just a second, I want to send this link to a couple of people, and I just would like to know their opinion on really what's going on right now. And you know what? If some people chime in, if anybody jumps in the chat and they want to talk about what's going on in their country as well. But I just want to talk about the assassination attempt on Donald J. Trump and the fact that there are freaks out there right now. We haven't really seen this since Ronald Reagan in 1980, 80, 81, 80. I was very young at the time, and I remember our teachers in kindergarten kind of gathered everybody and said, "Hey, this has happened." Now, this is not like what happened at when I was a child, um, for or when my mother was a child, rather, for John F. Kennedy. And I've asked my mother about that. What was that like? What was that like when Kennedy got shot? My mother was very young. She was born in 1949, so she was, about 11, 12 years old, 12 years old, I guess, when that happened, maybe 13, when that happened. And so, I wanted her opinion. Of course, she told me the same thing. The teachers gathered her. Um, okay, so Model Misfit, it's Loki. Okay, good deal, Aaron. Loki Wartooth, glad you can join. Jump in. I apologize. I'm a little out of sorts right now. I've had a long night at work, and then on top of that, with everything going on and just the craziness that's happening. And I'm gonna bring up some links. I'm gonna try to share some links that we can look at, some video that we can look at, maybe some Twitter stuff that we can look at or whatever, and just kind of see what happened, talk about it a little bit. We don't have to go crazy with it. I've got Ronnie Trickshot here, ladies and gentlemen. There he is. Hey. How you doing,
Hello.
man?
I'm good. It's good to be joining you at short notice.
I really appreciate it. I
No
kind of
worries.
sent a message out. I know that you are on the opposite side of the globe, so to speak. So
Yep.
your time frame is different than my time frame, but that means
hmm
that while I am asleep or I am going to bed, you are on the other side of it. That you are actually awake, and that it's daytime for you.
Yep.
And so I'm glad you could join me. I kind of just sent the call out to a few people and said, "Hey, man, if you're not doing anything, can you jump on? Can you talk about this?" Because what I like to do, and if you don't know about me much, if you've only kind of seen me do my pop culture streams with Matthew and whatever, what I like to do, I like to gather as much information. I like to gather different viewpoints, and I like to hear different viewpoints, and I like to disseminate between those to make my informed decision. Now, not
Mhm.
everybody in this world is like that. Not everybody in this world. A lot of people live in an echo chamber. You can be right, you can be left. It doesn't matter. Everybody loves to live in their echo chamber, and I fully understand that. And Frostbite is here, dropping by, hanging out for just a second, and I appreciate that. So, Ronnie, when you saw the news today of this assassination attempt, what was the thought that came across your mind? The first thing, regardless of what you think about Trump, regardless of what you think about Biden, what number one, I guess, here's my question. This is twofold, and I apologize for backing it up
Yeah.
a little bit. Number one, what does America look like to you right now with all the identity politics shit and everything that's going on? And number two, what does this message send to the rest of the world, in your opinion?
That's a great question, and I can only tell you what the overwhelming feeling in Australia is right now, and has been for some time. We think Americans are crazy. Let's be totally
I
honest.
believe it.
We can't even fathom the thought that you guys can't find two people that are more qualified or slightly less batty or slightly younger to run the country. And this morning's events for us, they just reinforce that feeling that this kind of thing only happens in America, because America is a crazy place. So that's what we think.
And I would like to think, although I don't know for sure, I would like to think that anybody in America that would be thinking, what do we look like to the outside world? I would like to think that that's exactly what they would feel like we look like to the outside world, to the rest of the world. Um, they see all of the number one, and I talk about it on this channel. I talk about the movies, I talk about the shows, I talk about the identity politics and all that kind of stuff that invades just your pop culture, right? Like whether it's comics, whether it's movies, TV, video games, whatever. But then when you get into the politic realm, and you see all of the different laws, and you see all the different states that are at war with each other, so to speak, over those different laws and everything. Um, I'm sure that it looks like to the outside world, like you said, they're crazy as shit. Like what, a woman is a woman, a man is a man. Why are we debating these subjects, right? Um, and then we come to something like this, and I feel like it's all fun and games to an extent. I say fun and games. I feel like when we talk about the pop culture realm, okay, everybody has their idea about what they feel like, their idea of a woman should be, or their idea of what a strong man should be, or a strong woman, whatever. But when we get into like leaders of a free world, and when you have assassination attempts on those leaders, that's when all that other shit goes out the window. And we've seen throughout history, and I don't know how old you are, Ronnie, but I remember when Reagan I was young. I was probably about 7 years old when Reagan survived an assassination. And I didn't
Yeah.
understand the brevity of that until I was a little bit older. But my mother, when in 1962, I believe 62, 63, when Kennedy got assassinated, she was probably about 11 or 12 years old. 12 years old.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine what that was like at that time for a sitting president. Okay. So at this point right now, what do you make of American politics right now and this current situation that has just happened at a rally? This isn't even, near November. This is at a rally. So a long way around it. What do you think about this situation right now? And I apologize for taking such a long way to get there.
No, that's all right. It seems like such a foreign concept to me, for a number of reasons. Australia, as you may know, has very tight gun control laws. So the fact that anyone gets shot is a shock to an Australian. I was just saying to my father this morning, if I had a gun go off in my street, I'd be jumping over the back of the couch, and it just seemed like to an outsider watching some of the footage from this morning, no one seemed surprised. There was some level of concern at that rally, but for the most part, people were just looking around like, what was that? Like they'd heard a gunshot before. I've never held a gun. I've never fired a gun. I don't think I've ever heard a gunshot in my life. So to actually see a president shot, that's just amazing. And then in the aftermath, to see this, I suppose, godlike devotion to politicians and the amount of misinformation that starts to come out, that's just hard to believe as well. I can't believe that the two sides of politics are so fiercely devoted to their leader that they'll believe anything they say. They'll believe anything that's said about their opponents. I think Australians are known for a laconic sort of larrikin sort of nature, and we love cutting down the tall poppies and hanging shit on everyone, taking the piss out of everone.
Yeah, taking the piss. I've heard that many times.
Absolutely, we wouldn't go shoot anyone, but yeah, we're our politicians. We see them as ordinary people that have just put their hand up to do that strange sort of a job and talk a lot of bullshit on the nightly news, and we don't really have this godlike devotion to our leaders. It wouldn't be concerning if someone got into a bit of trouble as Trump has. There wouldn't be this outrage. There wouldn't be this all this commentary on how horrible a thing it is. So yeah, it's interesting to watch from the other side of the world.
It's interesting to me because living in it day to day, being in the middle of it, and don't get me wrong, by no means am I completely plugged in, tuned in from a politic aspect. I do not watch Fox News every day. I do not look up articles every day about every latest thing about Hunter Biden or whether or not he had cocaine in the White House and this and that, whatever. I think those things are, at one point in American history, I think those things would have been just unheard of, for one, for the news to report on it. But I also believe that years ago, that may have been a thing of there were some things that the media organizations kept to themselves. There were some things that were kept private and from the public view. It's well known that John F. Kennedy had many affairs at this point with many a starlet, Marilyn Monroe being the most famous. And so yes, those things, like, I think years ago, those things were huge situations that if the public had known or become aware of, it would have been really a big deal. And while there were people who knew, for the most part, the public was kept in the dark until 2, 3, 4 decades later. At this point now, with social media and the way things travel, with the way news travels now, we pretty much know about everything at every minute that happens throughout the day. And I feel like that's a good thing for the spread of information, but it's also a bad thing for the spread of misinformation. And I will tell you a quick story tonight at my bar. My sister texted me, said Trump's been shot. And real quick, I wanted to say hey to Kiwi GI Customs and Collection too. Thank you.
Hello, Campbell.
Yeah, thank you for stopping in. My sister texted me. She said, hey, Trump's been shot. I'm like, what are you talking about? So I turned on our local news. I flipped through the channels. No one was covering it. I went to Fox News, easy place to find information, at least in this country. And they were right on top of it, right?
Yeah.
Well, amazingly, as I turned the TVs on behind the bar, because this is not just partisan news. This is news. This is a big deal. I had two groups of people at two ends of the bar that asked me to turn the TV off and told me they did not. One of them were people in their late 70s and early 80s
Yeah.
that told me they didn't want to watch this drivel, which I found fascinating, for one, because my mother is in her mid 70s.
Yeah.
And they told me, "Oh, I don't want to watch this drivel." And I was like, "What?" I'm like, "This is big news. This is
Yeah.
not just, I don't care who you vote for. This
Mm.
is, and they thought that it was staged." And then I had some young people on the other end of the bar that asked me to turn it off because they just didn't want to watch politics. That's literally what they told me.
Mm.
Now, I'm almost 50 years old, Ronnie,
Mm.
and I remember a time when people didn't divulge who they voted for. You might have had a husband and a wife. Now, in this country, I don't know about yours,
Mm.
but in this country, you could have a husband and a wife. They would live their entire lives. And when they went into that booth to vote for someone and close the curtain,
Mm.
they didn't tell their spouse who they voted for.
Mm.
So I guess what I want to posit to you is that what is the idea that America is like, or maybe what you think, when I have 80-year-old people and I have 20-year-old people who are asking me to turn the television off from what just happened tonight to a person who is in the presidential race for America.
Mm.
What do you think about that?
Look, I actually think that's fair enough.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, I've even unfollowed a few people in social media just this morning because it just got a bit too much.
Okay.
Yeah, I just didn't want to engage with some of the rubbish that's flying around. I'm not suggesting that Fox News is rubbish, but
Sure.
today I think all politics, even in Australia, all politics is so polarizing. You're either in one camp or the other. Everything is so divisive. There are grenades being lobbed back and forth. It's easy not to want to be a part of that debate when you're having a hard time in your own life. You know, politicians seem to be just quibbling, arguing amongst themselves while we're struggling with cost of living issues, while we're struggling with coming out of the COVID pandemic, while we're struggling to get a job, while we're struggling to pay the bills. They're not really doing anything for us. They're just trying to be populist and appeal to their base. And we see through that. We are sick of watching it. And I think not wanting to watch it is totally fair enough.
To an extent, I can understand what and real quick, War Chest Full of Toys is here dropping by on quick, short notice, man. Hey, good to see you, brother. Love our conversations on Instagram. So, I can understand where people would feel that way. I definitely can. And regardless of what country you're in, of course, in your country, you have your own stuff, right? You have your own shit you got to deal with.
Absolutely.
And so let me ask you this: during COVID, I guess,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
what was the general feel, at least for you in where you're at in Australia? What was the general feel for you as far as how that was going, what the general public was feeling? Were they pushing against mask mandates? Were they okay with it? Were they, what was it like in your country compared to mine? And I can give you an idea of what it was like in mine.
First and foremost, COVID was not a political argument here in Australia. I think things were at their most tense in Melbourne. Melbourne had extended lockdowns,
Okay.
but for the most part, everyone saw the pictures coming out of Italy, saw the pictures coming out of the UK, saw the pictures coming out of New York, and didn't want that sort of situation in Australia, and immediately fell in line. Basically, power was handed over to the health authorities, was handed over to police authorities, and there were pretty harsh restrictions throughout Australia. But there was very few complaints. We were all wearing masks. We all lined up for vaccinations. We all towed the line. And I think in some ways we don't realize how lucky we are. I mean, vaccines never prevented the spread of COVID. But I think it's fair to say we weren't putting marquees up in car parks or burying people in public places because the hospitals were full and the death rates were spiraling. So the fact that Australians towed the line, I think, I mean, I can only speak to my situation, I think,
Sure.
is what got us through that time. And
Okay.
people were more likely to pull together in our neck of the woods rather than argue with each other about what we should and shouldn't be doing. So it was interesting sitting back here and watching it all unfold in the States with President Trump saying things like injecting bleach, some of the strange things that were coming out of the States during that time. But I can only speak to what I lived through, and we certainly didn't suffer some of those consequences like the rest of the world did because we were careful. That's probably all I can say.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Like that's, I'm really only asking about your experience and
Yep.
kind of what you went through, and I don't want you to speak for anybody else, and I don't want you to speak out of turn, whatever, only your experience. The reason I'm curious because I like to understand, I like to find out what other people went through, and because that information is difficult to come by. And a lot of times we live in an echo chamber where if there is someone that you meet or from somewhere else, you're only getting the information that you want.
Absolutely.
Right? You're not hearing something that you don't want to hear. And so part of what you just said, actually, when it comes to vaccines or masking up and all that kind of stuff, is not necessarily what I agree with personally, but I want to hear that information because I like to get all sides of the spectrum, so to speak, on anything, on any news story, on anything that's happening. And I have not actually been able to talk to anybody from your neck of the woods, so to speak, that experienced that and had to go through that and what you guys and gals did over there. We would hear stories over here, but you have to understand our media cultivates stories, and depending on their readership, they're going to fill that void. Now, that's not unusual. However, at the same token, you still are only going to get exposed to so many stories. So, hearing different experiences is what I love hearing. And even going back 4 years at this point, there's been a lot said and done. They've had congressional hearings now with Fauci, and I know that name, and everybody. But yeah, I like to hear those experiences. The reason why I asked about that particular period of time is because I think that particular period of time has really spurred about a lot of what, from a political aspect, from a left versus right, has spurred a lot of what's going on right now. So, there are people who still don't want to go back to the office. There are still people who feel like, they need to wear a mask. There are still people that feel like they need to get their 12th booster shot, against COVID or whatever it is. And so I won't invalidate those feelings for anyone. I have my personal feelings about that. But I'm not going to tell someone else how to live their life. And I guess bouncing off of that, the current rhetoric in American politics right now, and I don't know if you've read much. I know what you've told me so far. The current rhetoric in American politics is that you have this extreme side over here, and you have this extreme side over here. And in my world of pop culture, so to speak, and following Hollywood and other things, we've had certain prominent figures come out and say, well, if you voted for Trump, that means that you are just as bad as those mustachioed guys from the 1930s. Right? You understand where I'm going with that? And then on the other side, you have people who are like, look, If you voted for this other guy, then that means that you believe that a biological woman is not a woman.
Yeah. Yeah.
That if you're a man, you can have kids as long as you say you're a woman, then that works too.
Mm.
So I guess my question is to you is that set aside, I guess, the presidential part, but let's just say from like a pop culture thing, from action figures, comics, toys, movies, TV. Do Australians look at the stuff we're putting out as Americans, and do you guys watch that stuff? Do you go to the movies to see it? Or do you or is there a large number of people looking at those things and going, yeah, I don't understand what this is about. I don't identify with whatever this movie or whatever they're trying to
Mm.
say here.
Yeah.
Is that something that comes up in your conversations, or is it just, hey, here's a new movie? Is it good? Is it bad?
Yeah, yeah, we're pretty relaxed. We're pretty relaxed. I mean, we don't produce a lot of our own blockbuster cinema experiences, but we are, like I said, we're really relaxed. I think when we go to the movies, we take things at face value, mate. We're going there to enjoy it. We don't read too much into it. If it's a good versus evil battle, that's all we see it as. And if it's a good movie, we'll enjoy it. I don't think the everyday Australian reads too much into politics in pop culture. Of course, there's times where strange things pop up in movies that aren't exactly canon, where you might have a person from a specific group in society that seems to have just been thrown into a movie as a tokenistic sort of a thing. Sometimes we can spot that sort of stuff, but for the most part, we just enjoy the movies, particularly when most of the superhero movies have got Australians in them. So
Okay. Well,
yeah,
and let me tell you, just from my own personal point of view, I wish they had
yeah,
more. Okay, I wish they had
yeah,
more. Actually, I
yeah,
think most action heroes and or characters that have come from your neck of the woods, I think are awesome.
yeah,
And even as a kid, and even as an adult, I'm like, I bet that's a badass place to live.
yeah,
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 I bet that's
yeah, yeah.
and so yeah, I'm with you. I wondered, because I know that again, and I think this happens in every country. The news you get is like the news you get,
Yeah.
and it's hard to find sources, hard to find opinions from outside of that. And you really have to dig for that,
Mhm.
right? And even on top of that, I guess in one way, it's easier in today's world to find people who can give you the skinny, give you the the uh, the real information that
Yeah.
you're not getting, right?
Mhm.
It works both ways.
Yeah.
And so that's why I like talking to somebody like yourself, because I'm getting a real opinion from just a regular, hardworking, regular bloke that is just out, trying to have fun, have his toys, have his fun, right? Feed his family, whatever, and I like those are the opinions I want to know. Regular working people, not the blue-haired land whale that lives with 7 roommates and eats cat food, not
Yeah.
not the rich person who has never had to work a day in their life. I want to hear from people who actually have to put in a good day's work and work for their shit. Um, Real quick though,
Yeah.
this is somebody I've never seen before, but I have to show it because I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well hung banana hammocks is one of my favorite phrases now at this point. Says in America, Gen X is the age group that votes conservative, and as a Gen Xer, I can agree with that. Although we used to be counterculture. That's
Mm.
what's funny.
Yeah.
Boomers overwhelmingly vote liberal as well as Gen Z. What's funny about that though is that my mother is a boomer. Okay.
Yeah.
She was born in 1949. She is a product of World War II ending, so to speak. My grandfather was still in the service until he got out, maybe a year or two from my mother, or from actually a year and 2 years before her sister was born. My aunt was born, then my mother was born. So my
Mm.
grandfather actually was in World War II. And so most boomers I've come across actually are very conservative.
Mm.
Now, I don't know what statistics Well Hung Banana Hammocks has read, but I can say that most of the boomers I have come across in my life are actually very conservative. And it's because they come from a time period in America where, growing up in the 50s and 60s, they were counterculture as teenagers in the 60s. However, what happens to a lot of counterculture kids is that they get older and they become more conservative. It's not unusual. You look at a lot of your 60s potheads and your 70s acid heads and all that kind of stuff. And as they got older into the 80s and they started, you started having a lot of culture come out, like Wall Street and these like movies depicting rich people, right? Rich
Mm.
nightlife, cocaine. These are things, you know, all those people were in their 20s, 30s, and they wanted to be rich. They wanted to dress nice. They wanted to wear suspenders and put their hair back. And so I think it happens to every generation, so to speak. Is yes, there's that counterculture. So Gen X was mine,
Yeah.
and we were very counterculture and growing up in the 80s, latchkey kids and having a house key, and there's no parent at home for half the time you're there. Divorce very rampant. And then but then as we got older, we started to have more conservative values. Boomers, I think, started out very much that way, but then also as you had Woodstock, in the 60s and 70s, and then they got married and got divorced. I still think that it's a natural progression for people as they get older, they become more conservative. Do you agree with that, Ronnie? Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, yeah, makes sense to me. We have a funny sort of system here. The two major political parties, not really divided along generational lines. It's more one is the party for the worker, for the they're called the Labor Party. They're for the blue collar worker, the factory worker, the manual labourer, the trade unionist. So
Sure.
there's the Labor Party that has their roots in the working sort of class, and then we have what's called the Liberal Party, which, funnily enough, are the Conservatives. They're seen as the party for the old money types, the rich moleskin jeans wearers, the
Okay.
business types. So we're not as divided down, I suppose, generational lines, more along class lines, if that makes sense. But what we've seen in the last sort of 15 years, particularly since I've been voting, and since I turned 18, is that those parties are actually beginning to stand for the same things. They're becoming more populist. They'd rather appeal to the lowest common denominator than stand up and make statements based on making change in society. So it's actually made politics really confusing here in Australia. The two parties have become very similar. I think in America we're seeing the complete opposite of that. I think you've got
Okay.
two candidates that are trying to actually appeal to their base, and they're doing it so hardcore that it's polarizing society. And if different generations are voting for different parties, well, so be it. And I couldn't really comment on that. All I can say is in Australia, it's not so much like that. It's more working class and blue blood.
Okay.
But now it's all sort of merging a little bit. It's very confusing. So yeah.
Well, I think depending on, I know in this country, a problem that we're trying to grapple with is the high cost of living.
Mm-hmm.
The
Same
fact
here.
that you know, and it's happened in some of our mid-range cities, like where I live in Nashville, Tennessee, is
Yep.
that 10, 12 years ago, new couple, could purchase a house, they could put down a down
Yeah.
payment or not,
Mm.
depending on their credit, and could afford a home. It's called the American dream.
Yeah.
Okay, you've
Yeah.
heard it many
Yeah.
times, right? I don't know if they have
Similar
an
thing here. Yeah.
yeah, Australian dream. I don't know what they
Mhm.
call it, but the American dream. Young couple gets married, fresh out of college, they're into their careers, they buy a house. Well,
Yep.
that dream is becoming really a nightmare at this point.
Yep.
We've
Can't do it.
had large conglomerates buying up uh, subdivisions and houses.
Yep.
They are then turning around and renting those houses rather than selling those houses.
Mhm. Yep.
And so that's something that is happening with you as well. Is that correct?
Absolutely, it is.
So
Yeah.
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. I didn't mean to
Yeah.
interrupt.
I mean, my parents bought a house that was only a couple of times their average yearly income. Now you're looking at 13, 14 times the yearly income. It is just near or impossible in the bigger cities, Sydney and Melbourne, for a young couple to afford a house. You're looking upwards of $1 million. I was lucky. I live in Adelaide, which is a smaller town. I was lucky my wife and I were able to pick up a good deal when we moved in here, sort of 10 years ago. But yeah, I suppose Australia's affinity with immigration. So we've got, I'd say we have, a pretty sort of open sort of a policy in terms of immigration, and also about foreign ownership of property. Those sort of rules have been a bit loose, and it's made life pretty difficult for young people wanting to get into the housing market. So housing is definitely a problem here,
So
100%.
do you this is something that I think we're grappling with here as
Yeah,
well.
mm,
And so when you talk about immigration, for instance,
yeah, yeah,
um, we have a big issue with illegal immigration here.
hmm, yep,
And when I look around, when I look up, and I even try to Google whatever, when I try to look up like the immigration policies or the how do you become a citizen here, X,
yeah,
right, whatever. Um, and I find that every country, for the most part, has pretty stringent uh, terms for
yeah,
someone just up and moving somewhere,
hmm,
right?
yeah,
So in Australia, has your government relaxed its policies and allowed people who are seeking asylum or maybe just not or just deciding to stay or it's pretty far away. We're close to Cuba, right? We have people that make these incredible sea passages to us every day
yeah,
looking for asylum. But we also are landlocked with with Mexico rather. And
hmm,
we have a
yeah,
lot of people that are just coming over. It's kind of out of control. So the burden, it puts a quite a burden on the people who already live there and in
hmm.
these cities and towns. So have you experienced, or not just you, but Australia experienced from an immigration standpoint, it's putting a strain on your government, your cities or anything like that, your schools and whatever.
Yeah, I probably question's probably a bit beyond me, but
Okay.
from my own experience, I wouldn't pin any of our problems wholly and solely on immigration. It's a mixture of things. I mentioned foreign ownership before. Uh, allow foreign entities to buy up all of our farmland, all of our property, and rent it out. Um, Immigration, I think, is necessary in Australia. I don't think we are replacing our population as quickly as we should be. So that's hence immigration helps out with that. In the past, there has been issues with illegals, which I think are under control at the moment. I think a large part of those issues were coming from Southeast Asia and the ability of people smugglers to profit off of illegal immigration into Australia. But crackdown on that probably 10 years or so ago
Okay.
has sort of slowed those rates. Um, but yeah, in terms of causing the issues that the average Australian faces in Australia, I don't think it's wholly and solely related to immigration. it's just a mixture of things. Like petrol prices don't help.
No,
There's a
no.
gas, all sorts of things. Interest rates through the roof at the moment.
Yes.
The COVID pandemic, the war in the Gulf, just I suppose lengthening. What is it, the Hutu rebels? All the
Yeah.
ships have to come around Africa to get into Australia now, so the
Right.
cost of everything coming into the country is just going up. So it's a whole mixture of things. You can't really blame cost of living issues wholly and solely in immigration.
Yeah, and I wouldn't, and by no means I didn't,
Yeah,
at the very least didn't mean to maybe insinuate that
yeah,
was just it, right? Like it's
yeah,
just illegals or whatever.
mm,
I would say that for our country, there's multitude of factors as well.
yeah,
It is a large one, and
mm,
only considering because of how I guess accessible it is, right? You guys are really kind of cut off to an extent, right? Like,
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
there's only one way to get there, right? There's only one way to get
Absolutely. Yeah,
there.
yeah,
But what I mean by, as far as like from an immigration standpoint, is that I think America has always been, and it was founded on, and has always had that expectation of, you know, bring me, you're tired, you're poor, you're hungry, like anybody, right? Come here.
absolutely.
Um, However, I also think that over time, as you've seen with any empire, any nation state, any large entity over our world's history, is that there also comes a time where you know empires get a little bit too big, or
Yep.
they can't patrol their borders, as in like the Romans, so to speak, where they got
Hmm.
so large they could not control their borders, or whatever it is.
Yep.
Um, and so with America, I feel like, on one hand, I have, well, on the hand, I actually have absolutely no problem, and have known and still know people who have moved to this country. They have gone through the proper processes. They own businesses, they have
Hmm.
homes, families, and have prospered in this country. And I think that is the ultimate, right? Like that
Yeah.
is what it's all about.
Hmm.
But right now we do have a large number of people unaccounted for.
Hmm.
And it creates a burden on your healthcare system, on your jail or your police system,
Yep.
and just from a monetary system of, like, for instance, and I told this story today, my mother called one of the insurance companies here, and her policy had gone up. Now, my mother is 75 years old. Her insurance policy on her car had gone up, and she called, and I actually listened in on the conversation on speakerphone. And the agent from State Farm, anybody out there that knows State Farm and sees the commercials, State Farm is a huge insurance company in America.
Mm.
The insurance agency, out of her mouth, said, "We have so many illegals here without licenses and insurance that we have to raise the cost of all of our members' insurance rates because we can't control the illegal population." That's what the agent told my mother. It wasn't, "Oh, well, our rates go up every year,"
Yeah.
or, "Yes, ma'am, we realize you're getting older and you may get into an accident." No, no, no. It literally, I listened to it with my own 2 ears. The agent
Yeah.
tell my mother, "Yes, we understand you have not had any accidents. You're not a high risk driver, but there are so many illegals in our country now that don't have insurance or legal licenses that we have to raise our rates." And I found that fascinating that the
Yeah.
agent would actually tell my mother that on the phone. And I promise you, raise the right hand. I do not lie. I heard that with my own 2 ears. And so when you have situations like that, and that's just in one city, in one state in this
Mm.
nation, can you imagine what that's like all over the country where rates are going up for insurance or healthcare or, the cost of a home or whatever it is, right?
Mm,
Like, and like you said, many of those factors, there's so many factors involved, but that's
mm,
just another factor that's involved and so I guess what that brings me to, the reason why I asked this question is because I know there's so many people that say, "Oh, Trump, he hates immigrants, he hates
yeah.
illegals." Is that the mind? Is that what you've gathered from your news in Australia or from or somewhere else in the world, that Trump is this immigrant hating, you know, kind of person, or what? What have you heard from where you're at?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yes and no. So initially, we heard a lot about the wall. He was going to build a wall. He was going to
Oh,
make
sure.
Mexico pay for
All
it.
right.
I think a lot of that talk, though, is tempered by an overall feeling that Trump is hardcore America first. Doesn't care about anyone else. He wants to make America great again. He wants to save America. So I think that's the overriding feeling that we get from the coverage down here, more than just Trump hates immigrants and Trump's been bombastic again, and Trump thinks he won the election but he didn't. And Trump, encouraged people to go raid the Capitol or whatever. More than just that, we just hear, oh, Trump thinks that America is in grave danger and he's the hero that can save the day. That's
Okay.
that's the that's the sort of news that we hear. Yeah,
And
and
I
just
can
yep,
understand that. I
yep,
could totally understand that because
mm,
I think that that's the predominant way he is generally portrayed,
yep,
and the reason why I believe that is because our news outlets are predominantly left wing.
yep,
If you've really investigated that at all, our news outlets are predominantly left wing. There is Fox News, and you do have that. But if
mm,
you look at most of your media outlets in this country, they're owned by two or three conglomerates, and those
yep,
conglomerates are very much left wing leaning. So that means that all their papers, all their news
mm,
organizations, their nightly news, in each city, are very much left wing leaning organizations. And so while I understand, and actually there is some validity to that, and what you're saying as far
mm,
as what you're giving to me, as far as what you're hearing. At the same time, being over here and understanding that these news organizations fall under certain conglomerates that
mm,
just have this particular point of view. So no matter what organization it is, you're really going to get this slant.
mm,
One thing I will say in America that we found is that just reporting the news, just stating the facts,
mm.
has become very it's very unusual now. It's hard to find an article that just reports a story without getting at least one or two phrases or sentences from the reporter or the article writer on their personal politics.
Mm,
So it's very difficult now to get news that it just gives you facts and doesn't have that person's leanings in the article.
yeah,
And I think it contributes to why people have such a distrust in our media in this country.
mhm,
And I could see from where, maybe what you see, and maybe no, again, I'm not saying you're hardcore just paying attention to all this stuff. It's just this
mm,
is your experience. This is what you've noticed just reading this, hearing that, seeing that. Um, but knowing, living here and knowing that so many of these media organizations are on one side of the fence, it's really difficult to actually get balanced coverage of
mhm,
something. And
yep.
real quick, I wanted to, because I know the chat, the chat's been kind of bouncing off themselves.
I
They've
can
been having,
imagine. Yep.
yeah, they've been having some conversations and stuff. And I just wanted to recognize a couple people here. Bobby Wold has jumped in as well, and says, "Don't know why they say that Trump about say that about Trump.
Okay.
Obama deported far more immigrants than Trump ever did. That is correct.
Hmm.
However, the news rarely reports that.
Hmm.
And also, real quick, a funny joke. He says, should have asked to speak with Jake. If you don't know, Ronnie, Jake from State
Yeah.
Farm is a huge personality over here. Uh,
Okay.
he is a commercial personality. It's
Hmm.
an actor
Yep.
who is a representative of an insurance company here called State Farm.
Yeah.
And Jake used to be this Midwestern kid from
Hmm.
Indiana, and now he is a different character now. But
Okay.
Jake from State Farm, yeah. If you ever want to look him up on
All right.
YouTube, look him up. Jake from State Farm.
Okay.
There's a couple different actors that portrayed him. I
All right.
think the white kid that did it was the funniest out of Indiana.
Okay.
He was actually pretty good. But anyway, so that's what Bobby Wold says, and I get
Yeah.
that joke. I know you
All
would. And then let's see here. Frostbite, the myth, the legend. I actually messaged him to see if he could come on. He had some family stuff, and he
Yeah.
said, "Hey, send Ronnie a message if you can." And I thought, you know what? I'm gonna try to get anybody I can. War chest full of toys says immigration is fine with me as long as they follow the proper process to citizenship. And that's where I'm at. Ronnie, how do you feel about that in Australia? If somebody follows the proper process, you know, and is that good enough for you, or you say, hey, I don't care who you are, come over here, come, stay if you can, whatever. How do you feel about that?
I think that's fair. 100% think that's fair.
Yeah.
Am I bullish about it? Absolutely not.
Okay.
Because I know those illegal immigrants are that desperate to pay a criminal their life savings to get on a rickety fishing boat and sail from Indonesia to come here
Sure.
in search of a new life. And we know the places they're coming from are terrible, 100%. But yeah, there's got to be some sort of regulation,
See,
100%.
I think that you, and that's what's fascinating to me, because you and where you're at in the world, like, you
Hmm.
guys have a whole different idea of what it's like for someone to come there.
Yeah.
Like, you
Yeah.
really, you're putting your life on the line
Hmm.
to ride the currents to Australia. I mean, right?
Absolutely.
Like,
Yep.
that's, you know,
Yep.
coming from Cuba to here, look, I get it, man.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm not, I wouldn't want to do it, but I'm gonna tell you
Mm.
right now, like, that, I think that's crazy. I think it's crazy as shit for somebody to,
Yeah.
to try
Yeah.
to sail there,
Yeah.
and
100%.
ride the currents. Real
Mhm.
quick, Kiwi Customs says, don't forget to hit that like button.
He does that. He does that everywhere to everyone, and he does it regularly to us on a Tuesday night. He's the
Love
guy
it.
that tells everyone to hit the like button. He's a legend.
Hey, I love it. Love it, love it, love it.
Yeah.
Always. And yeah, and anybody that's watching this live, and I know I don't have a ton of people watching. This is late and it's very impromptu. I didn't give much of a notice. But on top of that, anybody watching a replay that tunes in after the fact about this subject, man, yeah, hit the like button. I don't expect many people to share this stream, but definitely hit the like button if you can. Give a sub if you like what you hear. I like getting opinions from all over the world if I can, and since I've become friends and been able to talk to some people that are from at least one of my favorite countries I've never visited, it's actually quite awesome, especially since we're on like opposite kind of time
Yep.
frames,
Yep.
and I'm a night owl, so this might actually work out really good for me in the future, Ronnie. Really. You
Yep.
and I might be able to have some future conversations here.
I'm up for that.
Uh,
I'm up
yeah,
for that.
man. No,
Yep.
I love
Yep.
it. And also, let's see real quick. I know that I let's see. Kiwi had a comment. I just want to make sure um, that I hit it real quick. Sorry for scrolling down, but
You're right.
let's see. I will say this. Well hung banana hammocks which is my favorite name now. I love it. Conservatives believe in legal immigration, asylum seekers going through the proper channels, not people crossing the border illegally. The real issue in the U.S. is the lower birth rates.
Yeah.
That that is an issue.
Mm.
I will tell you, I have a 16-year-old son who is he interested in girls? Yes, he is. Is he interested in having a girlfriend like I was at his age?
Mm.
No, he's not. Will that affect him as far as moving forward in life? Very, very well may be the case. There's a lot of young
Mm.
men in this country right now that are not dating. They're more conservative than ever. They're not smoking. This is the first generation we've had in a long time that don't
Mm.
smoke compared to the rate of smokers.
Yeah.
But with that, again, you think about that, but I think that that ties into less promiscuous, less chance taking, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah.
And I also feel like in today's society, it's been made, especially for young men, to not be aggressive in finding a young female, so to speak. I
Mm.
think young men in this country, I don't know how it is in Australia, but in this country, young men are definitely made to feel like and I guess I don't want this to be taken out of context. Okay.
Mm.
So try to understand me. They need to respect young women more than ever before. But I can tell you, when I was a young man, I respected women when I was 16 and 17 and
Mm.
18. It's not that I didn't respect women, but I think in this country, we've had this very huge girl power kind of thing take over. And young men have been made to feel as if they are toxic, that they are too male, too, they're toxic males. And so what you have is a lot of young males who are just deciding to not date. They're saying, hey, you know what? Okay, fine. If you think I'm a bad person, then you don't want to be with me, then you know what? I'll just not date you. I'll just not
Yeah.
pursue the opposite sex. And I think that's a big issue in this country, and it does contribute to lower birth rates. I do believe that.
Mm.
Now, are males in Australia still as headstrong as Crocodile Dundee? Is that
um.
I know it's stupid.
Oh.
I'm just messing with you. But what do you think? Is it have you noticed a change in younger men in your country?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And in some ways, it is a change for the better.
sure.
Yeah. In other ways, though, I think we have lost a bit of the old laconic larrikinism that Australia was, I suppose, renowned for. But there's enough of it out there to keep us quintessentially Australian. I'm involved in local sporting clubs, and boys will be boys.
Yeah, yeah.
So
You can't take the boys out of the boys and the girls
yeah,
out of the girls. I
yeah,
think the
absolutely.
overwhelming majority are, it is what it is. I think no
Hmm.
matter what you read, what you see, bottom line is, and as many people as I talk to at my bar and as many people as I come across, girls like girl things, boys
Yeah.
like boy things.
Mm.
Is there an intermingling or a mix, or is it, you know, uh, hey, you need to be more aware of this? What? Okay, fine, yes. But
Mm.
overall, we still see those classic norms. And I think the norms
Yeah.
are good because the norms is what keep us. I think the norms are what keep our societies regular, I guess. I don't know. I don't know a better way to put it.
Yeah.
Are there changes or improvements to be made? Sure. I mean, growing up in a very divorce heavy couple decades as myself,
Mm.
and women going out and working their own job, getting their own bag, doing their own thing, and now to the point where women are just as uh, aggressive as men when it comes to finding a partner, so to speak, right?
Mm.
Um, I can't imagine what it's like as a young man now, where some girls are just as aggressive as it used to be when you're trying to find somebody to sleep with. You get my drift, right? I mean,
Yeah.
going out to clubs. Look, dude. going out to clubs. Like, I'm not saying that girls weren't always at the ready, but looking at TikTok and Instagram and Facebook now and like whatever,
Oh yeah.
YouTube, girls are just as freaky and go get them as dudes now, dude. Like
Oh,
that's it is. I mean,
yep.
and I think for a lot of guys, for a lot of young men, it's overwhelming. I think it's overwhelming as many women that are just like, "Hey, I'm gonna get mine, and I don't give a damn." Like that's, I firmly believe that. I see it. You see it on social media all the time, and kids emulate what they see, what they
Mm,
watch.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, Real quick too, I wanted to highlight this. Kiwi Customs also said in New Zealand we have to save up so our kids get a fighting chance to buy a house. That
Yeah.
is happening in America.
Mm,
It is. It is happening in
yeah.
America, and you
Yeah.
see a lot of families where it's like, if the parents are fortunate enough to buy a house, they either leave it to their kids at this point, which is not
Yeah.
unusual.
Yeah.
But, however, you also see a lot of people who, um, buy their children their first house. They say, "This is your inheritance. I don't have a lot of money to leave you, but I'm going to buy your first house for you, and that's your inheritance. What you do with this house, especially in a city like Nashville, Tennessee, that house could well be worth over
Yeah.
$1 million
Yeah.
in 5 years, you
Yeah.
know?"
Yeah. Look, I don't think changing gender stereotypes have slowed the birth rate. I think
Okay.
changing gender stereotypes have changed priorities, and the
Okay.
changed priorities are slowing the birth rate. I think younger people these days are a little bit more materialistic. You know, they want what their parents have, but they realize it's going to take a bit more money to get there. So they're more career driven. They're more money driven, and they'd rather put off. I've put off having children. They'd rather put off
Okay.
children to get a good base behind them before they even think about
Do you think
children.
that also, however, has kind of gone to the destruction of the nuclear family, so to speak?
Yeah,
Do
yeah,
you know what I'm with the nuclear family, what I'm talking about,
yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
Husband, wife, and 1.7 kids or 2.3 kids or whatever it
yep,
is.
yep. Mum would stay home, cook dinner, and raise the
Yes.
kids. Doesn't happen anymore. Women, and rightly so, women uh, are allowed to be independent. They're allowed to be earning their own income.
Right.
They're allowed to have their own financial interests, and I think that's a good thing for society, 100%. Um, it's just that it's changed the priorities of women. It's changed the priorities of men as well,
Right.
and that's what slowed the birth rate. So
Um, do you maybe think that because of those changes, and I'm not saying they're not good by any means, because I think that,
mm,
anybody should be able to follow what it is that they want to follow, believe what they want to believe and chase their dreams, get
yeah,
their bag, so to speak.
mm,
Do you think that has been better or worse for children?
that's interesting. Uh, Not having children myself, I probably find
Okay. And
find
I'm okay with
pretty
you
hard.
commenting on that. Some people
Yeah.
say, "Well, you don't have kids, you can't talk about what it's like to." I don't believe that, because
Yeah.
each person has their own experiences, and even though you may not have children, you may have family
Mm,
members. You may babysit your kids your uncle or your brother's kids all the time. You may be
yeah.
around children all the time. Maybe you're not. But I think everybody has their own opinion, and that's okay. Like, I don't have a problem with somebody having an opinion on those things, because
Yeah.
I do believe that everybody's opinion is valid. And so I
Yeah.
guess my question is with that ability for everyone, and I'm not look, I'm not saying women need to be in the kitchen, okay? That let's not kid
Mm,
ourselves. I'm not stupid. However, with the proliferation of the family unit being more busy than ever, and
mm,
parents working jobs and not being at home, and therefore passing children off to daycare or childcare or to schools, and having the schools be kind of in charge of those things,
mm,
to an extent, do do you think that destruction of the nuclear family, albeit good for some things,
mm.
has somewhat contributed maybe to um, a lot of the children growing up today and really not having a strong foundation? behind them, if that makes any sense at all. I
Yeah.
guess I'm leading you with that question, so to speak.
Interesting question. Very interesting question. I don't know. I really don't know. I think some parts of today's society are easier on kids, and other things are much harder. I mean, I couldn't imagine growing up with such prevalent social media.
I can't either.
Even as a 20-something, 30-something year old, the effect that social media had on my overall mental well-being was pretty shocking. I must admit, it's hard not to dial into social media and start feeling jealous about your friends and what they're doing and being left behind.
Sure.
So a lot of that, I don't envy kids of today, but I think also because kids are having children is a much more deliberate decision these days. I think kids are looked after a lot better by their parents, even when they are busy. I think the family has become much more insular. Back in my day, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that. Back when I was growing up, it took a village to raise a kid. You know,
Right.
I knew all the kids in the street. I knew all the parents in the street, and the parents all helped each other out. I was over at this kid's house playing my
Yeah.
JoJo's. I was over at
Same.
that kid's house playing cricket.
Same for me too.
Yep, it took a village. And what I've noticed about society today in Australia is that we're a lot more insular. I don't know any of my neighbours. You know, the houses are closer together than they've ever been before, but I couldn't even
But
tell you
people
what
are
their neighbours
further
like.
apart than they've ever
Exactly
been
right.
before.
Exactly right.
That is
Yep.
exactly the same here.
Yeah, absolutely. So in some respects, it's good. In other respects, yeah.
I would say probably we, to an extent, and I was kind of hearing you, explain that. On one extent, I kind of thought in my mind, kind of two sides of the coin. It's like, hey, families are kind of closer together now. But then, back in the day, your neighbors knew who you were and they could discipline your kids. And if they got out of line and you knew you could stay out all day, but you knew when it was time to come home. But everybody knew everybody. You went to get the paper and you said hello to your neighbor who was pulling in the drive and all that stuff. So I think we would probably both agree that time period probably overall is probably in my mind a healthier time period for people as a people. I do believe, and I agree with you, it's more insular now than ever before. Social media makes us more insular, even though supposedly Facebook was supposed to bring us together. Find your 195 friends that you haven't talked to in the last 12 years. But I do look back on that period of growing up, and I feel like probably our age group, my age group, your age group, was probably that last age group of growing up where you knew your neighbors. You didn't try to hop out of your car and run inside your house as fast as you could to not have to say hello to your neighbor, right?
And we're slaves to this.
Yeah. And I will tell you something, and I'm not gonna prolong this stream too much longer. I will say this, and I'm gonna highlight a couple comments real quick here before I kind of want to wrap things up. But I'm so glad that you joined me for just this quick little chat.
I'm honored, mate.
It's very enlightening, actually, and I love getting these opinions. Kiwi Custom says, yes, us as men are getting a bad rap over here too, and that's in New Zealand. And then I have Model Misfit says, I love women. Yeah, I do too, actually. I do love women. And then let's see, well hung banana hammock. I have to say it as many times as I can. I love it. I fucking love it. All right. And I'm going to go back one too, actually, because he said this. He said U.S. birth rates are 1.9, Australia is 1.86. To sustain a population, you need 2.3. So both countries are about the same situation. I agree. They are very low. And we kind of went over some of those theories or maybe some of our opinions on that. And then well hung banana hammocks. Ugh, love it. Dads and moms definitely seem more engaged in their kids' lives than parents in the 80s. Um, some because of necessity, some because parents today generally want to play, spend time with their kids. I can tell you I fall into that category. The way I grew up, my parents divorced when I was about 8.5 years old. And every other weekend I went to my dad's and he either worked or slept. And so every other weekend I hated going to my dad's because I spent all my time alone or with
Mm.
my drunkle or my grandmother. And the one thing they would do is take me to Toys R Us every other weekend and buy me a new G.I. Joe or a new Transformers because that was their way of showing me they loved me, was to buy me a new toy. I hate saying it, but it's the truth because I
Yeah.
would go over there and be like, I don't want to, come over. There's nothing for me to do. Can I go to Toys R Us? And I'm sure they want to slap me silly. But my point being is that, yes, I think parents do. And the last several years, I've tried to show that with my son, who is 16 now, is that, yes, I love you. I want to be with you. I want to spend as much time as I can with you. I want to shape you. I want to be around you. But me growing up, yeah, that was not the case. I was a latchkey kid. And a lot of us growing up in the 70s or 80s into the 90s were latchkey kids. You had a house key, you got dropped off the school bus, and you spent the afternoon by yourself until your parent came home, and they were
Yeah.
probably divorced. Um, and so yes, that was kind of the norm. But yeah, so really, just I wanted to get at least a mindset and an opinion from someone who doesn't live in this country, considering what happened today.
Yeah.
And let's not, here's the deal. Like, let's not forget, like, what happened several hours ago doesn't for America, it doesn't happen on a regular basis. For some countries, it happens all the time. We have to remember that. We have to
Mhm.
take it within context that there are people in this world who live in constant bombings,
Mm.
who live under constant duress that their little town is going to get raided. They live in constant fear of being killed. There are places in this world that have it far, far worse than we do.
Yep.
But it's not every day that the American president, a former American president, and possible
The next one.
future
Yep.
and nominee has an assassination attempt. And when you actually look at the pictures, when you look at what happened, yeah, it's shocking.
Mm.
It is shocking, and I think at this point in this country, politics at this point has become so divisive that there are people who literally said today, not joking, and I get it, a joke is a joke, man. There are people who literally today said, well, if they only got a couple inches to the right. And to me, no matter what side you fall on, it, that's the last thing we need at this point. There's so much going on in
Mhm.
this world today that we can disagree, agree on, bicker about, whatever.
Yeah.
But for actual people to wish harm on somebody, regardless of what side of the coin they fall on, I
Mm.
just find it's a sad place.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And so I guess that's somewhat what kind of spurred on why I wanted to at least put out the invite and see
Mm.
who maybe could join me and just get an idea of what it's like from somewhere other than here, which is we live in this insular box. And so I really appreciate you, Ronnie, coming on and just kind of giving me some of your insights
No
and what
worries.
you think, man.
It's been an honor, and if I could leave everyone with one thing, it's the sun will come up tomorrow. Just
Thank
don't
you,
worry about it.
Annie. Thank you, Annie.
Yeah. um,
No, you
don't
are correct.
don't take anything too seriously. If you don't put any opinion before any relationship, Um, just let things go, and keep it real. Keep playing with your GI Joes. Keep enjoying life. So, yeah.
Dude, I couldn't say it any freaking better. Yes. Keep collecting comics, keep watching movies, keep watching TV shows, keep playing with your freaking figures and having fun.
Yep.
Yeah, life is far too short as I've come to find out actually in just recent hours with
Mm.
some family and some other people. Life is far too short to get so wrapped up in this stuff that you
Yep.
can't at least enjoy your own life.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's always good to hear other opinions. Ronnie, stick around for just a second while I
Yeah,
play
no
this
worries.
outro out, man. But thanks to anybody that is hanging out tonight. I really appreciate it. And anybody watching the replay, leave a like, leave a comment, whatever you feel about this, man. And I really appreciate it. Thank you to all of you. I'm Pop Blender. That's Ronnie, Trick Shot, Aussie, Aussie, Aussie. And we'll talk to y'all
USA,
later.
USA.